But at the end of the day, one of the basic things we lack on Guam is private sector investment. And as a result, it has made us so dependent on federal money. And if Guam is to succeed in the long term, we need to have an economy that is more than just waiting around for the federal government to hand us the next budget. We need to have an economy that is built on the expertise and the economic works of our people. We need our own healthcare industry. We need an expanded capability to do manufacturing in industries, in research and development, in broadband and artificial intelligence. When we start to diversify our economy and have these good paying jobs, then Guam will succeed.
So I wanted to move on to more environmental medicine.
Okay.
It's part of one of the social determinants of health. You know, you talked about PFAS or PFOS chemicals and maybe efforts to remediating or remedying some of the water supply.
Right.
Could you expand a little bit on that?
Sure. So, growing up, I always used to believe that Guam had the cleanest water, right? We were so proud of it. You'd turn on the tap and you'd go, oh, our water's super clean. Has limestone in it. It would leave those funny little marks on your kitchen. But we always thought it's such clean water. Our air was so clean. Our water was so clean, right? Come to find out, all those years of, all of the military, activity, firefighting, chemicals that have been made. And it's not all the military. I'm sure that it's just across the board, but it's ended up creating these chemicals that are now showing up in significant amounts in our water supply. And it's something that needs to be addressed long term. You look at the world and you see cancer rates going up. You see us constantly, as humans creating things without quite knowing the full implication of what we're creating.
Right, the long-term effects.
Right.
And for the audience, PFAS, I can't say the whole, the word or the chemical is, but they're sometimes called forever chemicals.
Yes.
And they can last, it can take thousands of years to actually break down. So imagine it getting into your body. How are you going to break that down or eliminate that? It's going to be a hard deal. And the clinical implications is it's tied with things like obesity, various cancers. We know definitely kidney and testicular cancers, but it could be potentially a lot of other cancers. What else? It can affect fertility,
right.
What we're saying, reproductive health. Also, it'll probably mess up our metabolic health, our membranes, so potentially things like diabetes. So I've been always pushing that, as in terms of my clinical practice, in the past, I've just looked at diabetes, okay, diet, that's the solution, and some medications to support. But I'm finding more and more out that it's just not the diet. The chemicals in the food, yes, but there's all these other chemicals, the 80,000 potential chemicals that we are exposed to that is probably contributing more than just the diet.
Yes.
It's affecting us metabolically, and we've seen the rising rates of all these chronic diseases.
Right.
So I think it's imperative, and I want to sound the alarm that we have to limit the amount of chemicals we can control to get into our body, and whatever sources that are already polluted, we got to be able to clear that out. And my other concern is, I think Biden did just really something recently, I think, about identifying 8 or 10 and trying to clean out the water sources of the different PFAS. But then I think that's a great start. But then the issue is we're playing whack-a-mole, because a lot of the industry, we ban these chemicals, or we identify and clear it out, but then we start producing other chemicals
right.
that are similar to those chemicals. So we can never really get ahead of this. So that's kind of my concern, where we're just playing whack-a-mole with all these chemicals. So, so I think that is probably a huge thing that we're faced with in terms of regulations, and sometimes making people aware, and also have companies accountable to those things. But going back to Guam, like, what were your ideas on how we clean up the water? And you also had some ideas on desalination. I thought that was kind of interesting. Could that be a source to maybe improve our water source?
Well, no. So the desalinization idea that I had really is a backup plan.
Okay.
So the desalinization, here's how my thinking goes, right?
Yeah.
The worst time to plan for a disaster is after it's happened,
Right.
right? You want to plan for it before it happens and hope that it never, ever, ever happens. So our plan right now for water security is FEMA has warehouses where they've stored bottled water. So if something happens, that gives us sort of an amount of water that will cover us until we're able to get generators or whatever it is or whatever the systems need to be back up and running so that we can get water back out of the water lens. If something was very extreme, let's say we had an extreme storm, right? There, Landon Idlet over at National Weather Service is talking about, we might need to create a Category 6 typhoon because the planet is changing, right? Or if, God forbid, there is some sort of a military incident, be it a terrorist attack or an enemy attack, that somehow disables the port and prevents us from being able to get shipments of fuel so that we can't get the water out of the water lens, right? So we're going to need something small, something that we have enough fuel, be it batteries, to be able to operate. So I did the research, and it only costs about $10 million to purchase 30 desalinization units, portable ones, that you could put out there, put a small power source on them, and it would be able to provide water as a backup. It's water security, right? In the event that something were to happen to our water system, to be able to buy us time in order to get whatever we would need, the parts or whatever, in order to go back to being able to pull water out of the water lens. And given the nature and the degree of risk that Guam is currently under, I believe that it absolutely is something that the federal government should and could look at funding to be able to provide the people of Guam with that backup, not just the bottled water, which would go in a matter of days, but to actually be able to provide us with a little bit more lead time so that in the unlikely event that anything were to happen to us, we have that peace of mind that somewhere tucked away, we would have a backup plan, because the one thing that is essential is water. People are talking about shelter. We need shelter on Guam. Absolutely we do, but at the same time, the weather here is pretty nice. And, nobody's going to, die from the elements because we don't have winter. We don't have a really, really bad summer. I mean, the temperature here is pretty decent, right? We all go camping. But if we don't have water, that's it. I mean, water is absolutely essential, right? As is food. So that plan really is something that, when the Department of Defense puts out this mandate saying we have to make sure that, our military and our installations are prepared and secured and have the backup plans, not because we're going to need it for sure, but because they have to be there. That's the whole purpose of backup plans, right? The people of Guam need that backup plan. The fact that we don't have one right now, the fact that we worry and rely on others in difficult times is not something that we can count on. Because if you think about it, the Department of Defense's main mission, if something were to happen on Guam of a military nature, will not be to take care of the people of Guam. They're going to be forward in the fight. They're going to be out there, right? Hopefully they're going to remember us, but their mission is to defend the national security. And they are going to be forward. And we are going to be here on Guam looking at each other going, did we plan properly? Did we prepare? Because it's peace of mind. Do we have the communications infrastructure? If our cell phone towers go down, how are we going to communicate with each other? We saw what happened after Mawar, and people were concerned. Do we have the backup plan? Do we have the Starlinks that are able to just, pop up and connect people again? Do we have the backup systems? It doesn't cost that much to put them in place, and we need to look at that. So that was the desalinization. But on the bigger question of PFAS, I think we need to stop doing this reactive process, which goes to what I said at the very beginning about having a vision. Guam, for decades now, is the United States' most important strategic location for defense, for national security. Therefore, we deserve to have our environment taken care of in a way that not just restores what was damaged, but maintains it at a level that would have been there had we not been a military base. So, for example, any sort of PFAS contamination not only needs to be cleaned up, but we need to have a commitment from the federal government that our water on Guam, and again, we're so small, it doesn't even cost that much to do it, that our water is the highest quality, that we should have no issues drinking our water. We need support to be able to put in systems that protect our waterlands but allow people to build homes. We need federal assistance for that. The legislature in Guam is struggling with that right now, but there's no reason that we couldn't have some federal assistance to be able to make that affordable and put that in place, because protecting that water source is important for all the people of Guam. And making Guam whole, cleaning up the Superfund sites, cleaning up the PFAS, and fixing once and for all the brown tree snake issue in order to bring back native birds. I know that might sound like, okay, with all the serious things we've got going on, but honestly, we're an island. We need to have, at least at a minimum, not only a thriving economy, but a thriving environment. And we cannot be constantly burdened by, policies that are saying, oh, the ORDOT dump is, out of compliance and this and that. We need to have the federal resources and the federal support in order to make this island clean and environmentally restored to the point that we have the island that we all treasure and want to live in. We look around, it's so beautiful. But underneath that beauty, we have serious problems with our water quality. We're starting to have issues with the ocean quality. We have to watch it. They're doing exercises. They're going to be putting, they're going to be scuttling ships, or they're going to be putting ammunition out there. What's going to happen with all of that in the water? How is that going to affect the marine life? Right. We need to look at that and ensure that while the military is able to defend the national security 100%, right alongside that, we need to ensure that as humans, we are taking care of the planet that God entrusted to us. And those two things should be done at the same time and done with equal attention.
Right. Before. Definitely, we have to protect our environment because, like I said, it is affecting our health. And I got a little excited when you talked about the desalination, because you can do, I believe, reverse osmosis through that.
Yes.
And that would be definitely a safe water supply and could be alternative, but I guess I don't know what the cost it would be to do desalination as a constant water supply. I'm assuming a lot more than 10 million.
It probably, well, it's not that bad. I mean, there's a lot of places in the world that are completely dependent on desalination because they don't have any other sources of water. Now in Guam, we're extremely lucky, right? We have over 100 inches of rain every year, and that provides us with a beautiful source of natural fresh water, right? And so we tap into that. We have an amazing water lens, which we have to protect because that is one of our most precious resources on Guam, is that fresh water lens. There's so few places that have that. But we also can't just sort of take that for granted. We have to understand, and we have to also watch, because desalination isn't always the best idea, because when you do that, the byproduct, where does it go? If you start pumping that back out, then that starts to negatively affect the marine
the high
habitat.
salinity content.
Exactly. So I'm not talking about it as a permanent solution, but as a backup solution, if something really was a difficult situation for the people of Guam in an absolute crisis, having that would give us a peace of mind that would give us the breathing room to then, understand that our deterrence is stronger because we are strong as an island and we know we have backup. If something terrible were to happen, we would be okay. And so I think we need to provide that to the people.
And 10 million in the grand scheme of things is not
Is
much.
nothing.
It's not much.
Yeah.
I would rather drink the desalinated water than the water that's cooped up in plastic containers from FEMA.
Right?
Plastics all over the place, parts per million.
True.
That could be just as unhealthy.
Stored for years, and who knows what's been leaching out from those plastic bottles.
That could be more unhealthier than the
Exactly.
aquifer water.
Exactly.
Yeah, so to move on to the next thing, I've encountered some situations where it's kind of a sad situation where I've heard of where a female partner or wife, or I guess girlfriend, the husband or the boyfriend was doing drugs and felt very unsafe around children, obviously, and was majorly stressed. But she said she was kind of stuck where she couldn't really have a way out because she can't just move out because rent is too expensive. And kind of in a hard place, right? You want to move or you want to provide a safe place. So you got two issues you're dealing with. You know,
Right.
the drug issue as well as not being able to have the modality to move out or move to a safer place. So what, do you have any comments or on that conundrum and how do we solve for that?
So the drug problem is something that I'm definitely focused on. You know, in all the years that I've lived on Guam, you know, when I was in Liguan Terrace as a kid, crime was, you know, it got bad a few times, but it was more, you know, my mom and I would be looking out the back window and we would see some guy trying to break into a house across the way, and it was, you know, nobody was home and he was just going to probably steal something. And, you know, occasionally there were some murders and some serious crimes, but, you know, overall, I just have been shocked by the degree to which crime is now sort of, you know, taking hold in ways that are shocking. I mean, people are sending around on WhatsApp video of somebody with a machete at a gas station hacking the other guy. And I mean, and clearly they're on drugs, right? So a couple of things with drugs. First, the Department of Defense is actually recognizing Communist China's role in producing a lot of the origin chemicals for crystal meth, for fentanyl, and for other issues. And if you think about that from a national security standpoint, right? When other forces are trying to challenge the United States, it's not just a military challenge, right? There's the social media challenge where they try to do information attacks on us. There's the cyber challenge. And there also are challenges against our society. And the fact that they know that there are people in America who will take drugs. And so by creating types of drugs that are deadly and that are incredibly addicting, by flooding the market with that, that is one way to destabilize a society so that you get the upper hand. So if you look at it, it's not just drugs. It's not just the drug cartels. Is there a bigger strategy going on in the world where in this big tussle, which we always come back to between China and the United States, what are all the things that we believe that China and its allies, you know, Iran, Russia, North Korea, what are they doing that is trying to weaken the United States and its allies, which includes Guam? You know, Guam is part of the United States. And so on the one hand, that is good that that's being recognized because that means more resources are going to come in to fight the drug battle, right? Number two, Guam. We've got a clear border. We're tiny. You can put, if you can put a 360-degree missile defense system around Guam, you can put a 360-degree corridor around Guam and be able to, using technology and AI, detect every single sea vessel that is coming onto any shore, bringing anything suspicious, and be able to interdict it. And then the really concerning thing is, did you know that a lot of the drugs that come in through domestic mail, U.S. Postal Service? And even though the government of Guam and the governor spent put her people in there and got them deputized so they could go up to the post office and look through the mail, they're only allowed to go through international mail. They're not allowed to look at domestic mail. And actually, even in the United States, and a majority, or not a majority, but a significant amount of drugs, both on the mainland and here on Guam, come through the domestic mail. And they're not allowed to be able to look through that. And I think that needs to be changed. And I think in Congress right now, you're going to find many representatives from many states for whom fentanyl deaths is a huge issue in their state. And so this issue of, I mean, what privacy do you want in your mail? If you can basically give someone a colonoscopy before they get on an airplane, right? You go through your luggage, you have to go through an x-ray, they're patting your entire body down. Then why aren't we scanning the mail if we know that drugs are being transported in the mail? So there needs to be a push, and this is something that I'm committed to moving on and finding other like-minded states, if I make it into Congress, to put a 360-degree cordon to stop the drugs from coming in. Because if you stop them from coming in, then you can address the treatment and you can start to get us back on a path. If you don't cut off the supply, then you're not going to be able to do that. Right. So that, I think, is something concrete that can be looked at, that can be done. Right. So the drugs is definitely an issue that is squarely in the federal policy lane. And I think we need to address that.
Yeah. So I don't really understand, how drugs are screened at, like, say, the USPS. Is it not as simple as get a dog to walk the aisles of where all the packaging is and they sniff it out, and, if the dog sniffs that out, we can open the package? Is it not that easy, or why is it?
Dogs are incredibly expensive, actually. And there's not even that many trained dogs if you think about it. I mean, even at airports, occasionally on high risk areas, you'll see them bring in dogs to a certain airport. But it's actually very, very expensive to have dogs at those airports. But technology, here comes, right? So there are new AI-enabled sniffers that are being looked at. So there's new technologies. There's a company that I spoke to about a week ago who actually is working in the private sector on creating a mail system where, and it doesn't slow down the mail, but as the mail goes through, it actually has sniffers that detect this whole laundry list of things. And the Postal Service, I believe, does some basic screening. But the fact that drugs are still being able to make it through the mail means that those screenings have to be significantly enhanced, right? And so as fast as technology is moving, we need to harness that technology and get it to work for us. And one of the areas that we can do that is creating 100% screening of everything that comes in through the port without slowing it down, 100% screening of everything that comes in through the air, and then putting that corridor, increasing the support for the U.S. Coast Guard, because the Coast Guard does a lot of different things, right? Illegal fisheries, they look at, immigration issues, they look at search and rescue. But lately, they have seen an increase in their, activities to stop drugs from coming in. And so they need more support. They need more resources because they do a great job at doing that, but it's not sufficient. And we need to increase that. And then again, if we put cameras around Guam and we linked them and we had AI screen it and just do the red flag so that you would only need to have people responding to a red flag area, you could harness technology in an economical way to protect Guam, not only from the importation of drugs, but from illegal immigration, from so many different things. And I think that is something that is moving forward. Your other issue is housing. And this is a serious problem on Guam. I believe that we got into the situation that we did because we weren't really paying attention in Washington when all of this huge military buildup started. It's not thinking ahead, right? And so when you don't think ahead, something starts to happen, and then the consequences of it start to play out. And then you're like, oh, shoot, we didn't think about that, right? So the pressure of all of this military buildup on Guam has basically sucked up all of the available rental housing on Guam and driven the prices up. And the more contractors are coming in to build up all of these $1.8 billion in additional military construction going on behind the fence, all the companies that are involved in that are literally buying up all the available housing and outbidding each other for it, and then cramming it full of contractors, and they're locking our local people out of the market. And that is something that we have to absolutely address. So there's a couple ways to do it. Number one, the late Senator Ben Pangilinan, back in 2012, was looking at a program, and it was a privatization effort that the military engages to create more available housing for the military, right? That needs to be relooked at. That needs to be dusted off because it was a 1990s law and made available to address the military need for housing for H-2 workers, for contractors, and for the military to be able to relieve the pressure on local housing. Number two, we need more incentives for people to build more housing because you know what? We also want to make money off of this. Don't we want more jobs? Don't we want new housing companies popping up that are building affordable housing because then that's more jobs, right? It's more economic activity for Guam. We want the tax revenue. We want our local people to benefit. If somebody has land that they can sell, we want them to sell it for a good price or be able to get a reasonable loan, build a house on it or build a duplex on it and be able to rent it out and make income for their families. We want to make economic, strides off of what is a challenge, instead of just trying to address the challenge, right? The recent NDAA, they said that there's $300 million for military housing, drop in the bucket. that's not going to be enough because it's not even addressing the contractors. The contractor tail, for all of the military personnel that they're bringing in, there's several contractors per every military person that then is required to do grounds maintenance and facilities maintenance and engineering and all of the support pieces that go into supporting the military operations on island. And so that has to be factored in as well. And those contractors are all going to be outside the fence, right? They're not going to be living on base. And so that's going to impact as well. That's going to impact healthcare. How many people need doctors? That's going to impact housing. That's going to impact the cost of everything, right? And so we have to sort of look at federal incentives to bring in private sector money to build more affordable housing. And at the same time that we're building affordable housing, to build more multi-unit housing for the contractor community that is of good quality so that locally we can make tax revenue off of that. We can find places for these people to live and we can contribute to the general fund of Guam through the economic activity.
I like that idea. So, and preferably if we can get more U.S. private sector to invest here, right? And because I don't know if I like the idea of foreign, like Chinese companies taking hold of all the real estate here either. It has to be diversified. So
I think friendshoring is the key word that people are using now. So we want to look to our allies and partners to be able to invest here. And absolutely, we want more U.S. investment. But I also think we can't hold out for that because, if U.S. companies are not going to come, we need to look to the Philippines. We need to look to Australia. We need to look to Japan. A lot of our best hotels were built by Korean and Japanese and Philippine investors. So, that also strengthens our ties in the region. And I think that's always helpful for us. But at the end of the day, one of the basic things we lack on Guam is private sector investment. And as a result, it has made us so dependent on federal money. And if Guam is to succeed in the long term, we need to have an economy that is more than just waiting around for the federal government to hand us the next budget. We need to have an economy that is built on the expertise and the economic works of our people. We need our own healthcare industry. We need an expanded capability to do manufacturing and industries in research and development and broadband and artificial intelligence. When we start to diversify our economy and have these good paying jobs, then Guam will succeed. Instead of just literally our entire budget, they talk about it, it has three legs to the stool. And frankly, it's really two legs. One leg is tourism. One is federal assistance and one is military. And really federal assistance and military are both the U.S. government. So the only two sources that we get money from is tourism and the U.S. government. And the challenge with that, tourism is a great industry. Thank goodness we have an industry other than the military and the federal government. But tourism as an industry is largely low-paying jobs. If you think about it, in the hotel and restaurant industry, there are, certain management levels and the people that own them, but then a vast majority of it is, the people that clean the rooms, the people that maintain the grounds, the people that, bus and serve at the different restaurants. And so opportunities for people in the tourism industry, to give tours, to bring people around, to run jet skis or helicopter tours or this or that. There's a limited amount of opportunities for people to have a diversified menu of jobs. And so we need to keep that industry and keep it strong, but we need to diversify. We need other jobs that are going to spark the minds of our younger generation and get them into careers that are going to be interesting and fulfilling and good paying so that they can have families and careers and lives on the island. And we can reverse the out-migration. Because if you look at Guam, right, our population has not increased. We keep on having, new generations and they get trained and they get educated and so many of them leave. There's more people from Guam that live in the States. There's more Chamorros in, I think, between California and Washington State than there are in Guam. And how do we reverse that? How do we keep our talent here on island instead of losing them all and then struggling and having to pay twice as much to either bring somebody from the States or bring somebody from a foreign country on an H-2 visa, right? Why are we doing that? We're sending our own people off and then we're struggling to bring other people back. We need to create better opportunities here that are good enough to give a meaningful quality of life to our own people so that we've got our family units back together. I've got a grandson. He's now at Mercy Heights, right? And I want him to stay here. I want him to have a great career in technology and be able to do something and to be here on island, right? Because everybody talks about how close the family structure is on Guam, and we still have that culture, right? But that's being broken apart because if there's not an economic ability to live and to succeed, you have to take care of your family. So we have to fix that.
Yeah. I feel like I got a full, nice lecture at EOG.
I hope it wasn't a lecture.
I learned a lot, and
I've taken off for the semester, by the way, just to be clear, because I'm running. I don't want there to be any conflicts of interest. So I did take the semester off, and I'm not teaching this year. But I will tell you, I loved teaching last year. I mean, it was a great experience. Yeah.
But I definitely, I haven't watched all your videos, but I saw a few talks you gave out, and I really feel that passion, that fire in you when you that liveliness in your voice, and I think you have a lot to offer. You have a lot of experience to offer, but I always like to ask a lot of my guests, what is your ikigai, what your purpose in life, and back to circle, why are you running for Congress at this time?
So I'm going to be 60 next year, and one of the things I think that just about everybody goes through is you reach a certain point in life where you realize that this is it, right? This is your chance to make a difference, to try and make the world a better place, or have just some kind of an impact where you take the talents that God gave you and you try and do your best to give back, to recognize that, you are allowed to be a part of a world full of so many different things, opportunity and challenge. And how do I give back, right? So you think about that more and more. Of course, the years that I was serving in the federal government, when I was serving on the ground in Iraq, having several near-death experiences in helicopters that were shot at, and things that hit C-130s, and falling on the ground to make sure that you weren't hit by the shrapnel when rockets came into the embassy. In each of those moments, you really think about your life, and it does two things to you. Number one, it takes away that fear that you have of trying to do something, because you realize, what's the harm in trying to do my best? What's the harm in aiming higher? What's the harm in dreaming big and reaching for it? Because you could be gone in a moment, right? So there's that thing, I think, that happened. And the second is really, what can I do to give back? And I think about all the things in my life that I've learned, all the people I've learned from, all I learned in Guam, all the years I was in media, talking to people in their everyday life, going through challenges or going through triumphs. And all of that just sort of comes together, and you say, Guam has so much opportunity. It is such an incredible place, right? I finally came home. I was really excited. I went out into the greater world, spent longer than I thought, because, 9/11 left me out there in Iraq for 8 years. That was a long one. And then I finally got my business and was able to work my way back to Guam, right? But all of those experiences just gave me this ability to sort of look at this one area, federal policy, and to see avenues and opportunities that have not been pursued. And I really honestly know that they've not been pursued, not because people don't mean well, not because our elected officials are not trying. It's just because the type of experiences and background and training that everyone has had who's held public office in this particular area has been different. And if you look at what everyone has contributed over the years, you think about A.B. Wampat, huge thinker, right? Somebody who really understood Guam. Our very first delegate was somebody who actually was part of getting Guam a seat in the Congress to begin with. Huge thoughts that then came into being, right? You think about Ben Blas, a Marine general, the experience that he brought from being a part of the Department of Defense, understanding Guam's role in all of that, and all of that he brought, right? Dr. Robert Underwood, incredible, just understanding the rights of indigenous populations and how complex and complicated it is to be able to be our own island with our own culture, but at the same time a part of America, and all of the works that he was able to do. Madeline Berdalia with her big thinking, all of those years, right? Being First Lady, being a senator with Ricky Berdalia, one of the most iconic, members of Guam's history in recent times. And so you look at all of those big thinkers, right? And then you get to nowadays, and it seems like there's no more big thinking. It seems like we just kind of go and we sit in the chair and we do the party politics, and something comes across and you say what you're supposed to say and you're indignant and you write the letter, but there's this sense of fatalism, like things happen to us. So the director of the museum, Mike Bovacqua, says one of the problems with colonialism is you think that things happen to you and you don't think that you can be an agent for your own change. After I heard him say that was an article in the New York Times that he was quoted in, it just was so clear to me that I want to at least try to open a conversation with the people of Guam and say, I would be honored if I was able to go to Washington, engage with all of the leadership on Guam, create this collaborative effort, and to get us to aim higher, to get us to be agents for our own change. Because if we don't try and be agents for our own change, and if we don't try and fix some of these things, our island is suffering. And it's tangible, as we've discussed in this really long podcast, all of the things that are happening to people, your health, your security, your children. Are they going to stay on Guam and have jobs they love, or are they going to leave? All of these things are tied to federal policies. And what are we doing to think big, to really go for it, to try and change them? We can't change them all at once, of course not. But if we don't try, if we don't set a vision, and if we don't start attacking them one after the other and saying, look, we've got to change the way things are, or else we're going to get the same result. And the same result is Guam is not doing that well. We are struggling because when we try to do something and we're blocked, when we try to do something and we don't have the financial resources to do it, we're starting to tear at each other as a society. And that tearing at each other as a society, and the anger and the discontent and the disregard for politicians, that's not fixing anything. Yeah. It's tearing apart society. And instead of doing that, we need people who stop with the tearing apart and actually sit there and go, okay, this is complicated. How do we do it? How do we get all of the people in a room? How do we get the lawmakers and the private sector and the think tanks and the university and average people with problems together, set out what we need to do, and just start, it's like a list. Just start working on all of them to try and make the world a better place. So that's a big, 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 long answer, but that's why I'm running, because I really believe that it just takes a couple of people to start going in that direction and working together with people across the aisle in a bipartisan manner, and really set Guam on a path where we start to address all of these issues that have been around for decades and try and do something to fix them.
Wow. That's a great message, and I think we should end here. And for more information, where can we find you?
So you can we've got headquarters across from Alupang Beach Towers, right next to Bernie's Bar in Tamuning. We have regular office hours. Usually you can call ahead. We've got Facebook, we've got Instagram, www.gingercruz.com. You can reach us there as well. We've got the platform up, and we would love to hear from people. The more that we hear from people, the better able we are to refine what it is we believe we can do and what we want to do for the people of Guam.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Doctor.